Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Are we live? Let us know when we're ready.
Okay, you guys ready?
Yes, we're ready
Yes.
now.
I can't hear the show.
All right, we're gonna redo it because
Just give us a countdown and we can get started.
yeah, I'll give you a countdown.
Thank you.
All right, here we go. And 3, 2, 1, you're live.
Good morning, everyone. This is our weekly legal talk show. Today, we're joined by our superstar panel, attorney Milton Grimes from LA and attorney Vanita Banks. Attorney Banks is going to give an update of historic proportion of the appointment of Judge Brown to the U.S. Supreme Court. And there's been some other interesting cases. But before we get started, I need to tell you why, from a background standpoint, why this appointment is important to America. During the background on this, what you learn is that the Civil War, we had Reconstruction. And during the Civil War, one of the reasons is that we had the institution of slavery that was legal in the South. Well, after the Civil War, we had the passage of certain laws. But during the Reconstruction, the federal government granted the right to vote to Blacks in the South and provided some equal protection to Black citizens. But Reconstruction failed by 1877. The movement to give Black folks equal rights stalled. When whites regained control of the Southern state legislators, they began to enact laws that oppressed Blacks, known as Jim Crow laws. These Jim Crow laws were enforced by criminal penalties. These laws created separate schools, parks, waiting rooms, and other segregated public accommodation. Now, although the 1875 Civil Rights Act had stated that all races were entitled to equal treatment and public accommodation, the Supreme Court civil rights cases of 1883 held that the law did not apply to private person, Black folks, or corporation. The court made it clear that Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment provided no guarantees against private segregation. So these laws sprung up all over the country. Like, for example, in 1890, the Louisiana legislature passed the Louisiana Separate Car Act. The law applied to in-state travel that required that all railroads operating in the state provide equal but separate accommodation for white and Black passengers. And then what happened is that you had Homer Plessy, who lived in Louisiana, attempted to challenge the case. And Mr. Plessy was of mixed race. He was deliberately chosen because he was, I don't know this math, but he was 7/8 white and 1/8 Black, whatever that is. And but in any event, he challenged the Separate Car Act, arguing that the state law required Louisiana Railroad to segregate train, denied him the rights under the 13th, 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. He lost that case, but that case perpetrated racial segregation in America up through 1954. In 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court, in the case of Brown versus Board of Education, and the corollary of cases during that time period, they outlawed segregation. So we had 105 years of the U.S. Supreme Court actively supporting segregation. A lot of people call that Supreme Court conservative. I just say that was basic racism. But in any event, we were thankful that the court eventually changed over. Now, why is this history important? Well, in 2021, on January 6th, we saw what was almost the destruction of the American democracy. So without the knowledge of history, we're doomed to repeat ourselves. But by adding more minority to the U.S. Supreme Court, what it does, it gives us a voice in these critical decisions. Who knows where the court will head in the future? But we know what it did in the past. And unless we understand the past, why this appointment is so important, and even today, it's even more relevant today. We'll start out with Attorney Banks. Attorney Banks, tell us about this historic appointment. What happened?
Good morning, Attorney Lee and Grimes and our listening audience. Well, we had a front row seat to history this week. We saw Judge Jackson's historic confirmation this week on Monday, April 4th, 54 years after Dr. King's death. Justice Jackson's nomination was advanced from the Senate Judiciary Committee, and on Thursday, we witnessed the confirmation vote with bipartisan support, and we witnessed an historic moment as Vice President Kamala Harris presided in the Senate over that confirmation vote. For me, this week, I've just been feeling a great sense of joy and pride. This was a substantial glass ceiling that was shattered after 97 meetings with members of the Senate, after over 20 hours of questions, after preparing 1,500 answers to 1,500 written questions, as the world and America was introduced to Justice Jackson. We saw her intellect, her demonstrated exceptional credentials, her integrity, her knowledge of the and love of the Constitution and commitment to the rule of law, her grace, poise under pressure. We witnessed a master class on a judicial temperament, and her holistic experience, including her public defender experience, will be an important asset that she will bring to the court. She will make the court better because of her breadth of experience. This week was history making in a number of ways. There are now 4 women on the Supreme Court. There are 2 Black judges on the Supreme Court. And this is the first time where of the 9 justices, 5 are women or people of color. And so in the words of Dr. King, what we witnessed this week was true in his words, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Every girl, and particularly Black girls, can see themselves in Judge Jackson. Yesterday was a glorious day on the South White House lawn. I was filled with joy to see President Biden flanked by both Justice Jackson and Vice President Harris. This is a proud moment for Black women and children and America. In 233 years, it took us 233 years, as Justice Jackson stated yesterday, but we got here. Her exceptional experience, intellect, brilliance will serve her well on the court. She understands the lives of everyday people. She will bring greater community confidence to the court. Diversity matters. It matters on the Supreme Court. And it matters that all of our institutions reflect the communities that they serve. I was moved by her remarks as she thanked her family yesterday, and she stated that her mentors are Dr. King, Thurgood Marshall, Constance Baker Motley, that these were the shoulders on which she stands, and that she quoted Maya Angelou in stating that I do so now by bringing the gifts of my ancestors. I am the dream and hope of the slave. And it was remarkable to hear her state as well that it took one generation for her family to go from segregation to the Supreme Court. Truly a historic moment in our American history.
Yeah, Attorney Grimes, any comment?
Well, well said, Vanita. And it is a moment to be celebrated, without a doubt. But it's also a moment to realize how far we got to go yet. And that is white supremacy still runs supreme in my eyesight, and that the white women in the Senate on the Republican side, all of the suffering they've gone through in this country without the right to vote, with the abuse they've taken throughout the hundreds of years, along with slavery, they still did not fully appreciate and support her nomination to the Supreme Court. I would like to know what you have to say about that as a Black woman. Because in the past, you know, I was hoping and I was thinking that white women were our ally in the civil rights movement. And I still think many of them are, but many of them are not. Many of them are appreciating the benefits of slavery and white supremacy, and they're not fully behind our progress. But getting back on the positive note, I am real proud of her and thankful that she's on the court, because I think that she does represent and will represent the benefit of diversity in judicial thinking and judicial decisions. Sadly enough, I hate to see Clarence Thomas counted as a member of the court, as a member of color, because I think he intentionally tries to avoid any association on the majority basis. In the majority of his decisions, he tries not to identify with the needs and the situation of minority people. He tries to separate himself from that in his majority opinions. So we do have 4 women on the court, and we have a Black woman on the court, but he's only Black in outward appearance. This man doesn't think Black. So I still appreciate the moment, and I celebrate the moment that it is an indication of striving forward, but we still have a ways to go.
Well, I gave that history of the Supreme Court. It got a very sordid history of blatant racial discrimination against Black for over a century. Now, the Supreme Court agreed to take up the Harvard admission case by the Asian student. Now, a lot of people don't realize this. When you go to these schools, I went to go to these prestigious universities, you don't see Blacks getting PhDs and advanced degrees in very small numbers now. You see a lot of Asian students. And so my concern was that we're getting pushed to the side. And I was a little bit hurt that the US Supreme Court agreed to hear the case about Asian American attacking Black admission at Harvard. I think it's a big deal. So But the one thing the judge said, I was watching confirmation, she said that she wouldn't participate in the Harvard case, although Clarence Thomas participated in the Ride case where he tried to overthrow the federal government, despite the fact that his wife was involved with the group,
Right.
despite the fact that she has a conservative tank that actually promote these QAnon type theories. So, I wanted her to participate in this case because this is going to be a close decision. It will look like 5-4, but I think it's a big case because we just got rid of this separate but equal back in 1954. And so we're 67 years out, but that's not enough. If we're locked out of these prestigious institutions, not given a shot to participate, that means that we'll get further behind. So I hope that the courts reject these type of cases, and I hope that she's able to participate.
Do we anticipate that case is going, well, that case, Justice Jackson, as you stated, Attorney Lee, in response to Senate questions, stated that she would recuse herself from. And so she will be sworn in June or July after the close of the 2021-2022 Supreme Court session. And there will be several cases potentially that will come up before the court on which Justice Breyer will rule as well.
I was concerned because this case was rejected by the lower courts, and the fact that they're going to hear this case is troublesome to me. There's a lot of cases I think has far greater merits than this, and they're cherry picking these cases that I think actively divide America. This type of case just opens some old wounds, a little bit insulting in a certain respect. They didn't complain about admission of whites who are privileged. They only complained about admission of blacks. I think it's troublesome to me in terms of this approach that the court has taken.
As you know, this approach goes back to the Bakke decision back in the 70s, where the Supreme Court held that quotas were impermissible to be used in college academic recruitment decision-making. And there have been a number of cases since that time that has raised that question, including the most recent case, I believe, the Grutter case, in which the court held that race could be considered as one factor in achieving the critical and important interest in diversifying college campuses. And Justice Sandra Day O'Connell stated that maybe in 25 years, and this was in 2003, that race might not be a critical interest. But as we see, that has not occurred in terms of what you indicated, Attorney Lee, in the diversity of our college campuses and institutions of higher learning across our nation.
And what's more troubling is the feeling I have about Justice Thomas' position in that litigation.
And what exactly?
I will believe that he will vote against the cause of African-American people.
Yeah, because what most people don't realize, like in our state, the last time I went to graduation of my son or daughter who got their MBA at Purdue, the advanced degrees, if you look at the program, about 80 to 90% were foreign students,
Yes.
particularly Asian students. And I'm thinking, well, okay, why, of all the people to attack, these few blacks that go to these prestigious schools, why they attack that admission process? It's not like Harvard got like 20% Black students. They got a small percentage, and they want to eliminate those folks. The whole thing is insulting, quite frankly, to me. So I think that by having diversity on the Supreme Court give us a voice. Unfortunately, though, we may not have enough voice on the court to prevent these laws almost reverting us back to de facto segregation again. And that's what I'm concerned about. 5-4 won't protect us. I think that she get on the court, she's going to need some more help from somewhere, because I think that we will reverberate, we will return back to some of the adverse decisions we've seen in the past. And I don't think most people realize how fragile democracy is in terms of rights being protected. You're familiar with that. We see this abrogation of rights with this qualified immunity. But the race issue become prevalent in cases in our court system. It's an important factor. Whether people want to admit it or not, it's a factor. When Counsel Banks were talking about the decision of some criminal case in Northwest Michigan, and I don't know a lot about the case, but I'm thinking, what are the demographics of the jury pool? And what would be the outcome of a case like that if it tried in Detroit versus Northwest Michigan? So the point I'm making is that we need to strive, and not just, although I'm very satisfied and gratified today that we got Judge Brown, but we got to fight every day to make sure we get even more diversity on this court. So don't give up the fight yet. You got to get out and vote. And one thing too, I need to tell our audience about, both our senators voted against her. Senator Young, who I thought was fair, I guess I was misled, and then Mike Braun. They both voted against a highly qualified candidate. And what was insulting is they voted in favor of extremely less qualified candidates before. And so I'm thinking to myself, why would they vote against this candidate? I was disturbed by that, quite frankly. I think that our people, you got to get out and vote. You got to show up for jury duty, but make sure you get out and vote, because these people are not protecting your interests at all.
Just for the benefit of discussion, Nate, and reversing roles with those two people, what would your explanation be for voting against her if you could be them for a moment?
I have no idea where to start, because my problem is that they did not articulate a rational basis for their decision. If they say that she didn't have enough experience, okay, I can understand that. If they say that she did not correctly interpret constitutional law, everybody agreed this is an aberration. Everybody agreed, men and women on the Senate, that this was a highly qualified candidate.
Yeah,
they all said that. The most conservative senator said that this is a highly qualified candidate, highly qualified, highly skilled. So that used to be a criteria at some point in our democracy about when a person is promoted to a higher court.
Yeah.
Apparently, that no longer applies. So we have separate rules that applies to African-American candidates, and I was troubled by that, quite frankly.
Well,
so I can't give an explanation.
If I may, Vanita, ask you that question that I put into my statement earlier, Vanita. What is the explanation for the other women on the Senate not voting for this highly qualified candidate?
From my perspective, I believe that the nomination process has just become highly partisan, period. Highly partisan, highly politicized. Historically, as you say, Attorney Grimes, there have been some women allies in the movement for justice and equality, and there have been some that have not been. We know that white women have benefited from affirmative action, and to see those votes, those no votes on the Senate floor was both upsetting and discouraging, that white women were not more supportive. No question about Justice Jackson's superb, exemplary credentials. The only thing that I can come out with is that just purely partisan, purely political, playing to whatever they or whoever they think that their base is. You know, this whole confirmation process, which of course was a fait accompli. We had the votes, so we saw members of the Judiciary Committee and members of the Senate use this confirmation hearing as they are gearing up for the midterm elections and ultimately the presidential race in 2024. That's the only thing that I can attribute it to. I was talking to one of my colleagues, and I suggest that everyone who is listening here today, that as Attorney Lee stated, he was disappointed with the no votes from his two Senate members, that you send them an email communication or you call their office and you let them know that you are outraged by their vote and that their vote was shameful. Why would Marco Rubio vote against Judge Jackson? He went to the same high school as Judge Jackson. I believe that he was 1 year her senior. Why would Lindsey Graham, who just voted for Judge Jackson to the second most influential court in this country, the DC Court of Appeals, totally partisan, totally unacceptable, but we need to see if we can take that partisanship out of the process. Well, we'll never be able to take it all the way out of the process, but I am hearing groups talk about introducing some standards where only questions that are relevant and germane to the judge's qualifications in integrity are enabled to be asked during the confirmation hearings.
It makes a mockery out of our democratic process, and it's scary that they have put this great power into gamesmanship. I mean, I guess it'll always be a certain amount of gamesmanship, but it seems to have elevated to a position of, I don't know what to call it. It's just, it's frightening to see Lindsey Graham and all the others disrespect this highly qualified candidate, and other people followed that.
Well, we got several callers interested in following up on this. Okay, let's go to the line and take one or two of the callers. Caller, you have a question for our panel today?
Hi, yes, I did. I just want to make a comment about the white women. I think that attorney summed it up eloquently and factually. For them not to have supported her, and they put their party over the excellent candidate background. If you think about it, the last white man that was supported and elected, he wasn't asked these mundane questions about description of a woman. But I do hold the 47 that said no. It was political. It was tragedy, and I think that Justice Brown Jackson, I think she showed the elevation of us as a people, the Black and brown people, that we can maintain while they lose focus of the reason why they're voting or why they're in the positions that they're in. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you. Let's go and take one more call real quickly. Next caller, please.
Yes, how you doing?
How you doing today, Imhotep? How's it going, sir?
Was an embarrassment. Tim Scott is, I know how the other guys are. Sometimes you wonder if Tim Scott's ever going to come back over to the other side, and he just never does. Never does. He never does. So he never does. So I wonder. But two things I had questions on. One was this morning about the Governor Whitmore case, and that the analyst is seeming that the jurors thought that those gentlemen were set up, and the FBI, tricked them, and this, that, and the third. And we got to remember now, we had a plot to kidnap a sitting governor, the United Snakes of America. It's up to me. I just think, to me, in my opinion, maybe you guys can elaborate. The jurors there who felt this was all happening during the COVID, I think, and mask mandates, and they were angry. I think those jurors probably felt that, in my opinion, that they agreed with those gentlemen at the time, and probably, acquitted those two. Two got acquitted, two got hung. And then number two, Minnesota's had a lot of issues. We're going back to Philando Castile, George Floyd, right? The white lady who was killed by the police officer when she flagged him down for help. Now we see the no-knock Amir Locke. I just don't understand how they haven't made the subsequent changes. There are policies and stuff like that Nathaniel Lee, that that has been made around here, even with Chief Taylor and with the city council, no-knock warrants here, less than not stopping people for marijuana if it's less than ounce, things like that. I'd like to get you guys' opinion on both of those issues, because the governor, that governor case to me says a lot about white male privilege. And number two, what is the problem in Minnesota that they've had these 5 catastrophic incidences with to still not be able to make the subsequent changes that need to be made? Thanks.
Wow, that's a loaded question.
That is a big question.
That's a loaded question. I apologize. I didn't follow that case in Michigan, and I've been enthralled now in jury trial preparation myself. The trials now have opened back up here locally, and I've been working 12 hours a day preparing my own trials, and I didn't get a chance to pay attention to that Michigan case. I don't know about either one of you guys.
I didn't either, but before we start, what was the hung vote? Does anyone know? What was it hung at? 8-4, 9-3, 6-6?
I didn't see those numbers, Attorney Grimes, but I do know that the composition of the jury, they were 6 white men and 6 white women, and there were 2 outright acquittals, and as you stated, 2 hung. The jury hung on 2 of the defendants, and the government suggested that they may retry those 2 defendants.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree that I hope that this case doesn't represent normalizing this type of political violence and not holding people accountable that are engaged in this extremist behavior. This was a plot to kidnap and kill the governor of Michigan, but apparently the jurors did not believe the government's case. And so we talk about the legal concept of entrapment, which is an illegal act of tricking someone to commit a crime in order to either secure a prosecution and obtain a conviction. And that's done through threats or intimidation or fraud, for example.
But was that their defense? I did not keep up with that case either, because I've been in my own foxhole, seems like all year. But was that their defense?
Well, she said something I thought was very critical, though. She said that it's all white juror. Michigan is like 22% minority. And so the problem I have with that is that there is no diversity in a case that yells for diversity. That means that when you get a subpoena, folks, to appear at jury trial, make sure you show up, because I'm just shocked that you don't have any diversity on a jury of that magnitude, because that is a case whereby it reeks of having diversity.
I don't know what
subject
the
matter.
jury pool looked like. Was it all white jury pool? They didn't have any minorities in the pool that the prosecution could have gone after to put on the jury? I don't know any of those factors.
I don't either. I did read a description of the 12 jurors, and they are ordinary citizens
Okay.
that live and work in northern and quote western Michigan.
Yeah.
And as Attorney Lee stated, that if this trial was held in Detroit, would there have been, of course, a different composition of the jury? And it's so true that juries matter. And second to voting, serving on a jury, from my perspective, is the second, or probably the co-equal fundamental obligation of a citizen in this country. If you are asked to serve on a jury, please serve. Diversity matters. It's critically important.
Let's go back to line, get one more caller real quickly. Caller, you have a question for us?
Hi, yes, thanks for taking my call. No, I just had a comment. You guys are talking about some great things this morning, but what we really, I think the last lawyer just made it very clear. We have two obligations that we have as citizens of the United States, and that is serving on a jury and making sure we vote. And if we want to change anything in any one of our states, we have to get more people registered, and not just registered, but voting. And all of the people in Indiana, especially those of African-American descent, need to understand that both of our senators have not voted on anything to make our lives better in Indiana. And one of them is running to be reelected, and we need to vote him out. We need to get registered, and we need to vote, and we need to do it now. Thanks for taking my call.
Wow, that was a very powerful comment, because we've had a great deal of federal legislation, and now we've done something in American history that's never been done before. We had a record amount of jobs created during the last 12, 14 months. Unemployment rate is like 3.75%. America now has more jobs available than people to fill them. I don't remember that ever being an issue in American economy before, but yet we still don't go out and vote. And the corollary of that is that the folks that are run for office, like in our state and across the country, a lot of them, they voted against this type of things, a particular issue that affect minority rights. So our call is dead on. You got to get out and vote. Make sure you vote in the primary, in the general election. It's going to be critical, particularly this year. We have an issue. Judge Brown would never have gotten a hearing, folks, never, ever gotten a hearing to the Senate if the Republican controlled the Senate. Judge Brown would never be on the U.S. Supreme Court if we did not win Georgia. And that's how critical this election will be. If in this election, the Republican gain control of the Senate, we won't see any more Judge Brown go to the federal courts at all. You know, we're going to be stalled. So just make sure you tell all your friends on all our station, you have an obligation. Make sure you talk to them. Make sure they get out and vote, like our caller said. And
I wanted to go back briefly just to the cases we were talking about with respect to college admission requirements. The latest case was determined in 2016, and this was a case involving the University of Texas, and the court held that the University of Texas could consider race as one factor to ensure a diverse student population at the University of Texas. But again, these cases, these long-standing precedent, which we heard from Justice Jackson, should be honored, is under attack, as well as so many of our fundamental rights, including, of course, voting rights.
Well, my concern is this: when you're dealing with these admission standards, I've personally observed students from foreign countries that are supported by corporations and their government. They take up significant space in our educational process here in this country, particularly the graduate school, like the PhD levels. Now, we're using our state-supported dollars to support these institutions, but in the advanced degree process, we see across the board that Blacks are not participating in the graduate level in any reasonable numbers. So I'm concerned about that particular issue, that we're using our tax dollars to educate folks from foreign countries. So I have a little issue with that. I think that we should be open to everyone, but I think that care like charity begin at home. If we're paying my tax dollars to support an education institution, I want to support the kids in my neighborhood first.
Right.
I think that's important. Now we have one more call, and then we'll get back to our host, our co-host. Okay, caller, you have a question for us today?
Mr. Lee, if people that are going to graduate in high, not plan graduate, they still have a huge bill to pay. What incentives do they have to go to college in the first place?
I missed his question, Nate.
Yeah, Ms. Williams, I missed your question, sir. Can you repeat it?
The question is, if a person that is going to the school of higher learning, when they graduate, they find employment in the field that they have studied in, the huge debt that they have to pay once they get out. What incentive do a person have to go to college in the first place?
Well, that's a very good question, Mr. Williams. In essence, salaries have greatly escalated, particularly in the STEM area, that's science, technology, engineering, and math. Those salaries have greatly escalated. And because of that, when, we were going through the process, you graduate from college, you may make $20,000, $30,000 a year. Now these young folks are making six-figure incomes.
Right.
So the other thing though, students that are obtaining degrees in subjects that do not produce jobs, what they should do, what I advise students all the time is, and it's very important, whenever you have a friend or loved one that's going to college, go on their website and look at their statistics for hard employment and wages. So they publish that on the internet. If you want to see what does the MBA earn from Northwestern University, for example, University of Chicago, or from Columbia University, you'll see that these salaries are off the chart. And with these consulting firms, with the market and things like that. So the point I'm making is that we as community leaders, parents, we need to make sure that our kids and loved ones major in degrees that create wealth. In other words, don't go into a degree because you think it's easy. You go in one where you educate yourself to make money in the future. And I think that's paramount.
But I agree with the gentleman. The cost of these higher educations is a deterrent to a lot of young people going into the programs. That's why we have to change that. We have to make it we have to give an incentive for our young people to go into higher education and not let that cost when they come out be a killer to their desire to do so, sir. So you do raise a point that I think has to be dealt with.
He's raising an excellent point, and I'm glad he brought it up.
Yeah.
The high cost of education is a real problem in the United States. And we have to figure out a way to make education more accessible and affordable to all students. And if we look fundamentally, we've got to look at our educational system in the United States. to ensure that every student has access first to a quality education. And there's a lot of focus on the current student debt issue, and there are many, including the NAACP, the National Bar Association, and others that are calling for the elimination of student debt because it's crippling young professionals across this nation. And again, with Justice Jackson's confirmation this week, students in all communities across our nation, and I want to focus on Black students today, in seeing Judge Jackson, you can believe that you can achieve your dreams. I have a little different focus than Attorney Lee. My position is, one, find your passion and then discover a way to make a livelihood out of it.
Right. We've spread enough money across the world to show that we have the finances to invest in our own people if we look at it right.
Okay, let's go back to the line and get one last caller. Caller, you have a question or comment for us?
Yes, Attorney Lee, and to your panel, just on that one, ask what is the incentive of why go and education payback is so enormous so far as getting student loans. Just a little caveat there, and it may be a little bit off the subject in a sense, but Black folk have always, education has always been primary. We always have to be better. We always have to be at the top of our game. Doesn't matter if they're saying, okay, the field is not required or whatever, that there's not a lot of focus on the field of study that you went into. A lot of times when you go into these jobs, they're not looking at that. They just want to know that you got a bachelor's degree. They want to know that you have a master's degree. They know that you took enough time to invest in your own education and to put it on pen and paper that I'm certified and I have put the hours in study or whatever the subject may be. I always go back and change your major or go into another concentration to say not to go and get a higher education, not to get a college degree. That is not the right answer, not for us. And because another reason why I said that it may be a little different off the subject, it's like when they were saying when we had the COVID-19, when it first broke out, they told us we didn't have to come to the hospital. Don't come to the hospital. You have the flu. They turned us away. Okay. And many of us died because we believe, okay, it's a bug, it's just a virus, And this thing, they found out this was a really bad situation. Many of our people already expired off of the scene because we were told not to come to the hospital. It's better to have and not need than to need and not have. And that.
Well, thank you very much for your comment. Thank you, caller. Now, closing comment by Attorney Banks and Attorney Grimes. We got 1 minute. Go ahead.
Well, as I said earlier, we have to continue to fight for progress and rights because they're not going to be easily acquired. They're not going to be just given to us on a platter. So we have to continue to fight, but be proud of our game. That's what I have to say.
Attorney Banks?
As we reflect on this historic week, I agree with Attorney Grimes that we still have much work left to do to ensure equal justice and equality for all.
Well, to all our listeners, we'll be off next week in observance of the Easter holiday, where we recognize and honor the birth, the death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so we won't be telecasting or broadcasting next Saturday. And also, don't forget to make sure you're registered, make sure you vote in your primary in the general election. You get those subpoenas to appear for jury duty. Make sure you show up. Thank you for listening to us today. Thank you, callers, for your really insightful comment. And of course, thank our superstar panel. Thank everybody, and may God bless and keep you. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thank you.